this is a workshop part. But first of all, I'd like just to hear if there's any questions that emerge after listening to this. And then maybe I can tell you a little bit of how I came to decide that these were the 5 stories that I'm going to tell, and maybe invite you to do the same, to go through the same process. But I would like to give you a second to think if you have any questions, and start by answering those questions.
That was a good question, actually. I was very curious how you come up with this idea to put 5 stories, especially these 5 stories together.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. So I guess then I can answer other questions. I'm just gonna answer this question with a little bit more time. So this is the work, more or less. What you see is a whiteboard, another whiteboard, and a giant whiteboard. But here at the bottom, and actually this is actually more fun to look at while I'm actually doing it. I actually documented the whole process. So if I find I'll have it edited, and it's all gonna work in the end. So this is a timeline, and actually I started with the timeline, and I started this in July, right? And as I'm recording this is beginning of October. And I'm also shooting a video in the meantime, so that's why I look into the camera. And I started with some themes, like the themes were kind of emerging from the amount of stories and amount of story points and life points that I had throughout. And that was the first bit of the process. And then the second bit of the process was I had way too many anecdotes and life events that were connected to those. And then it was like pitching one against the other, which one wins. It's like a championship. Like, these speak to the same topic, which one wins. And after I kind of understood what were the themes, then what I did was write this down. It's like, my story isn't about me, okay? And have that as a guiding principle, because otherwise I would tell you that I was born here, that I did this, and I accomplished this, etc. And you wouldn't be here. It would be out grabbing a pizza or a kebab now. And you see, I had many more themes here. Like, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 themes here, and I narrowed it down. Like, they were kind of maybe the same. And even if you think about the themes that I have, which is role models, education, and knowledge, they're actually the same thing. It's all about growing up. It's all about how do we deal with information. They're all about knowledge and information. So more or less, this is my process. There's much more to that, and we can get into that. There's much more to say about it. I'll continue answering you, but I want to hear if there's any other questions. Also on the content. Oh, back.
How did you come up with the themes? Like, what was your thought process that led to, kind of these concepts?
So, for instance, the first story point that I had down here was that at the same time, I finished the Montessori kindergarten, and I started the regular elementary school, which I understood like 10 years ago that was a trauma. But I had no idea while I was going through that. Because obviously it's like, it's a new school, new rules, you're a kid, you just sit. And in the other school you didn't need to sit. And this new school you needed to sit and process information. I guess that's called growing up. No, that's called bad education. And then at the same time, basically 6 months later, my dad buys the first IBM PC, it's 1981. And this PC lands in my bedroom because that's the only place where there's enough space for, these were like big things. And I switched from Montessori school to Montessori computer. And so I realized, well, how did I do that? So I had an education system that was free, it was Montessori, then it was an education system that wasn't free, the regular school. And then I had a system that was free, and literally the first computer, you just had DOS. So you could play with A, colon or C, colon, dir to get a directory. It was lots of fun. But there was nothing in there, okay? It was empty. It was a playground where you could build stuff. And then I discovered basic.exe, and there you could even create games and stuff. And that was the process. And I said, okay, education with freedom, education without freedom. And it started emerging from there. And then all of the story about the bad bosses and not having role models. It was like, oh, okay, so there's role models really play a role here.
One thing I failed to connect in your school story, what was the motivation to take over the school? Yeah, you really managed to convey that spirit to me. I was like, okay, I'm rebel now.
But why? Why are you at school?
It was kind of a ritual. It was really kind of a ritual. So the Liceo Tasso in Rome is one of the most politicized schools in Italy. Actually, there was such a representation of the left-leaning part of politics that it was scattered like in 4 or 5, 6 different small parties that represented. And we were kind of supposed to do it. It was like we were doing it every year. And sometimes we would do it in collaboration with the teaching staff, sometimes against them, and so on. But it was kind of a ritual. At that time in Italy, it was kind of a ritual. So, yeah. We had our newspaper. Yeah, we had computers, which was unheard of in 1990. We had desktop publishing. Amazing stuff.
I have a question generally about this talk. Like when you started planning it, what was the goal? Like the goal was definitely not just present here, right? So is it like a pitching situation or is it to present your skill? So for me, it's like when you started doing it, there was definitely a goal, like what you get out of it. And so, yeah, and with this goal in mind, I mean, I guess I don't have a question how you chose the stories, but basically you said yourself that it's a very personal story, it's very close to your heart. I can imagine very difficult to tell also in different settings. So how you kind of choose the right audience for that or like right setting for that?
Obviously, all of this is for an audience because I can process this by myself. I'm fine. I can journal, etc. The intention behind this is very simply to give to my current clients a better lens to help them use my strengths. And then the second intention is to tell my clients, do this, because it's very powerful and it's going to reveal a lot that right now is hidden. The third intention is inevitably, if somebody is attracted to this kind of content, they would love working with me. But that's not the main purpose of it. So yes, it is marketing. Kind of everything is.
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
You have a notepad before you capture down on the board.
Mm-hmm.
What is the process like? How did you go through like writing the story before you capture down?
So I do a lot of work on myself, obviously, because I need to be as developed as possible to work with my clients. And while I was doing some of this development work with other coaches, I had this sleepless night. I was jet lagged, and somehow instead of counting sheep, I started recounting to myself my life story, but with the knowledge of today. And the next morning, I just started filling my diary, filling my journal with all of this information. And I have been doing that on and off for like 2 or 3 months. Like one of the things about crafting stories is that it's a very analog process. Like what you see here in terms of slides, it's all been prepared in the last 16 hours, like yesterday afternoon and this morning. There was nothing digital before yesterday. It was a lot of note-taking and journaling. And then from that journal, I kind of put it into the timeline that you see here. And then all of the work that I did was in front of the whiteboard again. And I actually couldn't work without the whiteboard because the whiteboard allowed me to delete stuff and to kind of arrange stuff. And we're going to get to how I then decided what comes first and what comes after. Oh, there's one and one. Go ahead.
Yeah, maybe it's 2, and maybe 1 is a bit weird, but I'll do the first one first, and then I think about the second question, if it's still relevant. So the first question is, how much of this is practice, like the parts of the story, and how much I know what the story should convey, and I just speak out of your heart, maybe also.
Mm-hmm. The process that I use is a process of rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And what I have done is more or less rehearsed, recorded, and listened to myself maybe 5 times for this specific talk. I might do maybe 10 times for another one, or a lot of times I will just rehearse without recording myself. after a while you start telling stories in a certain way, and you start using the same words again and again. But I would say that 40% of the material 40% of the words that you heard from me were produced on the spot, and 60% were part of patterns, language patterns that I had. I covered one of the cameras. I realized the mistake now.
I had to. So it's finding a sweet spot between practice and non-practice.
Yeah. You cannot memorize an entire speech and be authentic at the same time. I don't know how to do it. There's a few people that can read a teleprompter and be authentic. So I'm not everybody. Yeah. But honestly, for me, it's really important to know, I know already what's going to come next, even though I have a little iPad here that shows me current slide and next slide anyway, because that's always useful. But it's really important to, I think, for instance, to have the beginning wired in, all the words of the beginning, like the first 25, 30, 40 words, they're already there in your buffer memory. So whenever you need to start, you start. And then you're able to freestyle. Like if a dragon entered the room, I would be able to storytell about it.
Okay, then the second question, and I like don't want to offend, or I'm just curious. So these really emotional parts, there's a lot of grief in it, and so with grieving, at some point, of course, it's a really, it's been there all your life, but at some point the grief is also maybe not over, but not so intense for sure. How is it not possible, but how is it for you to have practiced this over and over and still showing this grief?
Is it a weird question?
No, it's not. And I have asked myself the same question, because in my first rehearsals, there's like 15 minutes of crying, and then it starts reducing. But anyway, the process of doing this presentation has been having red eyes like all the time. And I do think, like for instance, I did most of it without crying, so I thought I gave myself a good mark there. But for instance, maybe because that's my trade. But when I get to this, I let it out. Yeah. Okay, maybe because this is a story. It's already moving enough. The story in itself. Yeah, it's doing it again.
Also, I thought about stuff. I always cried, and then I also realized I know there is stuff.
I mean, this is basically Miyazaki's what is it? The Enchanted City, Sento Chihiro, and you know that's it. It's a written version of that movie that I just watched to cry. So yeah, and then I think there's also a nuance between grief and a sense of overwhelming emotion that is also, it's a manifestation of joy and connection, and it comes out as crying. Yeah. And since we're talking about death, we think about grief, but there's also this feeling of connection with something that is beyond us.
Intense love.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
And I had to say one more, because you had talked about intense, like when we first saw your younger self, like this face, wow, such an intense face. Really, maybe.
Thank you. The weird part about this process has been to process that intensity and realize that it's always been there. And yeah, I've spared you all the other stories of intensity. There were many. Izzy, you had a question?
My question is about pragmatism and realism. It takes luxury and privilege to be able to set yourself free, right? You were sitting in a bathtub with take money, but what if the reality of your situation doesn't really allow you to be free? So how do you draw the line of how much you let yourself go? You know, like where do you find the doubts?
Without freedom, you can do nothing. Yeah. So the first thing is to decide if you need to free yourself out of that situation, or if you need to change that situation in order to be free. And thinking about the wars, but the war that you are definitely living in first person, that's a big decision. Because if you link yourself to events, then you will make that your mission. So your mission will be outside of yourself, which is beautiful. I think we all tend to have a mission that is outside of ourselves. But also your life is conditioned by something that you can't control. Well, I always believe that, unfortunately, our borders are not free, our society is not free at all, etc. But I also see a lot of enterprising people finding a way to get out of situations where they have no freedom to situations where they have freedom. I don't know if that answers the nuance. The lights are over here, so in case somebody has questions there.
Just one last question.
Yeah, and then, yeah.
Will you show us like your framework, like the process of everything on the board?
Sure. I'm going to do that in a second. There was a question over here.
Yeah. More observation. Please interior your comments or thoughts. Because it strikes me that you're kind of killing 3 birds with one stone, or accomplishing 3 objectives in one suite. First, targeting, as I said. Doing this is kind of marketing. I mean, put it bluntly, helps you to do a deal for yourself. Second is that it is practice and vulnerability. And the third is that I'm assuming it's therapeutic for yourself. We're kind of self-developmental. I mean, if I had gone through a similar process, I would have been very like, wow, I'm growing as a person, experience. What is your thoughts on this observation?
I would just switch the third into common development rather than my development. I always feel very self-conscious where I am asking the audience to give me something that I don't have. I like to present myself to the audience with all my flaws and vulnerability, but having kind of solved the issue inside of me and sharing that solution with them. But you're definitely spot on. This is something that has multiple reasons to exist, and there's multiple drivers why some of these stories I haven't told in the past, and it is for me a milestone. But I'm thinking about sharing this with specific people as well and having their take on this and decode this. And obviously I also had a lot of internal discussion. One of the parts of the process was that once I had the whole timeline, I phoned my therapist, singular this time, and I said, can we have 3 or 4 sessions? I need to do something unusual, but I need to tell you my story. And you need to tell me if there's any bullshit in what I'm telling you. And so we did these sessions where I went through all of that. And then one of the questions is anybody getting hurt in the process of doing this? And that was also something that was very much on my mind. Oh, yeah, one here.
Yeah, I work with the social media, and also I have my own YouTube channel about business in Germany. And the question is, sometimes I understand that people need professional content, and sometimes I understand that people need personal content. And how to find the right balance between the professional and personal? How much people can be open in social media or not open? So how to find his right way?
Are we talking about people or are we talking about companies?
People, of course.
People, okay. I don't know, it's the level of their comfort. And I guess when we're talking about communication is not about me, communication is about you. Tonight is all about you. There was nothing about me. That I'm an accident that happened in order for you to go on a journey. And so it's really a matter of how much do I believe you can take it. If I believe that you can take raw vulnerability and cry with me, let's do it. So I think it's if I were coaching this person, I would explore their limiting belief. That maybe they don't believe that their audience have the emotional range or the, let's say, openness range to actually accept them being as open, as vulnerable as they can.
Mm-hmm. So it depends from the audience.
It depends on what you believe the audience is capable of. It does depend on the audience, but most of the time we have an idea of the audience. Like, the audience won't understand this. The audience is dumb. The audience is distracted. The audience who don't want long-form content. We all have short attention spans, yet we watch 50-hour Netflix series. You know, all of these things, most of the time they're internal. There's nothing wrong with the actual audience. There's a lot to think about in terms of the creators and what also, if my audience is used to me just doing a silly dance every day, it's very hard the next day to say, you know, every time I do a silly dance, a little part of my heart dies. We had a question here, and then a question over there.
Yeah, just following on. So what you've shown us in how to tell a story, that's very personal, but in a way kind of tell a wider point. And you did that kind of 5 times in many different permutations. And so kind of to this question, like, how can this be then valuable? And what are the takeaways for us in terms of how we use this technique of very personal storytelling with an overarching kind of like, this is what the story means. How do we then use that as we talk, I don't know, to investors, to our staff, or whatever it happens to be? So my question is like, how do we take these tools and apply them in a way that's going to get us results in our life?
Mm-hmm. Okay, the interesting thing is that the intention around this workshop is actually to ask you this question. But the one thing is simply, the moment I tell the people I work with who I am, they're able to work with me much better. And a lot of times I don't have a space for that. There isn't like, well, this week, Matteo, we're going to have a one-on-one, but next week we'll have a story time. That doesn't happen. And so I'm thinking about it for myself as a piece of content. That's why we have cameras here. And it's a piece of content that then gets delivered live or as a recorded artifact to the people I work with. As a, this is a passport to understand better how to work with Matteo. In terms of different grades of confidentiality and different grades of connection, I wouldn't begin by sharing this if I were meeting somebody for the first time. Maybe I would tell them a little bit more about the context, etc. So maybe you want to see this on a journey of getting another person to know you a little bit better. Or maybe you could see it, now I don't want to do your job for yourself, but you could see it as a special out of the blue episode of your wonderful podcast where we should actually plug it, Filter Stories on all podcast platforms. It might be a special episode where you turn the camera around, turn the microphone around and say, well, all this time I've talked about this thing that I care for. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that I was going to talk about the voice that you heard tell you all these stories. Maybe this begins to answer the question. I know that it's impossible to answer the question with full nuance, and I am actually curious to understand if you see yourself going through this process and finding things. There was a question from you, both of you. Okay, you start.
So as a storyteller, you want to tell a story. It might be about your personal life, or it might be a story that you have heard, like the way you started the topic. And perhaps you want to tell an amazing story, and you want to attend to as many people as you like. So what's the basic influence of an amazing story that people would love to hear?
Okay, so I need to answer that, but I can answer it by giving you a little demonstration at the whiteboard, and so we get a little bit more practical with that, and so I can answer your question as well from before. So let me get my toolbox ready. So who wants to cook carbonara with me? Okay, so at the beginning of a story, the first thing you need to do is to, first of all, you want to elevate the stakes, okay? And so carbonara is my favorite dish, so elevating the stakes. Plus I'm Italian, okay? I'm Italian, I need to do good carbonara. Not even that, I'm from Rome. We invented carbonara in Rome. So if I give you the false recipe, I'm really making a big blunder of myself, okay? So first step, elevate the stakes. Then introduce a problem. Okay, I know that the first thing you're going to do when I ask you to make a carbonara is go to your fridge, open the fridge and grab the bacon. Wrong. Okay, it's not about pork belly, it's about pork cheek. It's guanciale. And so the first thing you do is here it's bacon. Sorry, well, here is guanciale, and here is bacon. And so you start going, you see up and down, you introduce problems. The second problem, again in the fridge. You can open the fridge door, grab Parmigiano cheese. Wrong. Not Parmigiano, it's pecorino. Pecorino Romano, okay? It's another type of cheese. It's a goat cheese. It's not the other type of cheese. And so you see there's different problems. And then you're going to go with the eggs. But the problem is that you're going to use too many eggs. Okay? You want one full egg for the plate. And then you want only the red of the egg, one per person. Okay? If you have more than 5 or 6 people, you add another full egg. Okay? And now you're ready to cook. But I know what you're going to do. You are going to put the egg in the pan and you're going to overcook the egg like it's scrambled eggs. Don't do that. The big idea of carbonara is that it's just a question of timing. You have the pork cheek cooking here. You have the pasta cooking here, and you have a saucer here. You have a pan here with the egg already mixed with a little bit of pecorino. You get the pasta out. Not even 5 seconds, and it's in there. The pasta starts cooking the egg into a cream. Then you add the pork belly on top. You mix everything, and that act of mixing cooks the egg perfectly. You never cook the egg in the pan. This is the big idea. Then is a summary. Today you learned it's not pecorino, it's not Parmigiano, it's pecorino. It's not bacon, it's pork belly, and it's not too many eggs. There's a lot of eggs, but you separate the white from the red. Next time, next time, Grisha. Thank you very much. Okay, and this is, if you look at this graph, you can look at it in many different ways. If you are still familiar with your theater school, this is Act 1, this is Act 2, and this is Act 3. And if you think about movies, this is the beginning of Star Wars or the beginning of The Matrix, like, oh, I don't understand, follow the white rabbit, take the blue, red pill, then you get all the problems, you need to learn jiu-jitsu, you need to fight the Smiths, etc., and then at some point you kind of figure out you can stop bullets, and then you actually end the movie with taking over from the machines and so on and so forth. Or like in this case, your job here is to elevate the stakes. Your job here is to highlight all of the conflict situations, all of the problems. A story without problems, a story without villains is boring. Harry Potter without Voldemort, pretty boring. Batman without the Joker, pretty boring. And then you end up on a high, a big idea, something that people will remember. You summarize it immediately, and you maybe even had a to-do at the end. This as a framework is derived from the hero's journey. It is like this. You can challenge me. It's always like this. The beginning is always a formula. The end is always a formula, more or less. You can mix things around if you feel like Quentin Tarantino, starting from the end, giving flashbacks, etc. But it's still the same formula, even if you switch it around. And if you are super expert, you can also start from the big idea and mix it as much as you like. You don't need to. It works like a charm. So for me here, there was the story about the farmer. And these were all the ups and downs of good models, bad models, and so on and so forth. The big idea was Martha's story, and you remember the summary and the ending. So that's the answer to the question. Obviously, we can talk at length about this because behind this there's the 17 steps of the hero's journey, and behind the 17 steps of the hero's journey, there's hundreds of archetypes that you can tap into to have different moments, different emotional moments also in your presentations. But this is exactly what I designed next, and what you actually see here, but not here, here. This is the flow of this presentation that you just saw. Like all of this is the flow of the presentation that you just saw. So the beginning, all the different 5 stories, and then how it ends. The other part that I already mentioned is how analog it all is. And I think a lot of times when we think about we need to create a presentation, we need to create a talk, we just go to the computer. And this is something that I invite you to, to avoid as much as possible, because the ideas won't come there. And actually just to be the act of standing in front of a whiteboard will make it much, much easier for you. And then to start having to write down this timeline is relatively easy. To figure out that you're not giving yourself, you're not sort of hiding stuff to yourself, it's pretty hard. So I would advise to spend a lot of time on the timeline. And then it's a process of cutting, because we always have too much material. Most probably the version 500 of the presentation that you just saw lasts 5 minutes and has one story, and it's much more punchy than the 40 minutes that you went through.
Could you? So on the right diagram, yeah, I'm like do that super fast elevator, like bam 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 bam. This is what this story teaches you that. Da, da, da. Could you do the pecorino story, but actually what you did say in your 40-minute talk, but just show it on the.
Sure. I can even show it here. Maybe it's easier. Okay. So I'm Matteo, coach people, tell stories. There's the story of the farmer and the horse here. And then I start to elevate the stakes, and I start saying, well, this is the most vulnerable I've ever been. And I also say, well, I'm going to compress 47 years in 40 minutes. And so I'm trying really to make it an emotional thing. But I cannot spend too much time. This is an intro, okay? It's just the beginning of the song. You're kind of going to like it or not. But if I go on telling you a lot about, and the process I went through is so and so, and I grew a beard while doing it, and so on, it's going to be pretty boring. So I want to go as quickly as possible into the first story. But before I tell you what I'm going to tell you, I need to introduce it. Otherwise, you have no map. So I tell you there are 5 personal stories. Okay, so I give you a map, and you always know, oh, this story is boring, but there's only another 4. Okay, or I can. Yeah, it's kind of like that. It's like, okay, well, there's 5 stories I need to pee. I'm gonna, pee at 2.5. Okay, this is like giving your audience a guide and a way of seeing things. And I actually already at this point we were at this slide over here where I already gave you the bam bam bam. I already gave you the plan. Whoop, this one. So basically, if you knew the presentation already, say, it's that presentation, I can leave. And then immediately, I went into the, let's go back to where we were. And immediately, I go with a high point. And the high point that I had for the beginning of the presentation is, I have all of this agency, I have all of this power, I took over the school. With a K, because that's more edgy. Okay, and this is the uplifting story. But then our guide is, there is always a mantra in a good presentation. And the mantra of this presentation is it a blessing or a curse? Is it a blessing or a curse? Is it a blessing or a curse? So I can tell you this story about school. And then I have the first learning that I'm going to connect here, the let go. And so I've decided, since in the end I have let go, make space, and decide, I decided this is a good story for letting go of fear speaking. Okay, so this is how it's going to be. And I have, as I told you, many stories about education, freedom, etc. I decided this one is, for now, the punchiest. But then I need to give you immediately a problem, okay? Because otherwise it's too many uplifting stories. And anyway, in the story there's a problem with the stoner kid and the problem with the nerves and so on. So there's always an enemy to what I'm going to talk about. Then we go down here and we have the bad bosses, bad role models. But are they really bad? Okay, and so then there's again this lens of, is it a blessing or a curse? And then I have this kind of framework here, and here we have make space. And so I can connect the making space already to that. And a structure starts to emerge from this. Then I go up to the coming out and positive role models. I can go faster here, I think, because you kind of understood it. So coming out, and I have coming out as a decision. It's a wonderful decision. It's the most powerful decision. And so you can go up here, then you need to go down, and I have, let's say, the burnout story. And in the burnout story, I didn't highlight it as much while I was talking, but in the burnout story, the interesting thing is that here I had limited agency in these stories. Here I start to have agency because I'm an entrepreneur. And here I get learning on the letting go, on the making space, and on the decide scale. And so it kind of starts breathing more. There's larger learning. And at that point, in this case, the structure is slightly simpler. At that point, I'm ready to tell you, well, the story that you're here to hear. And that kind of brings everything together. Emotionally, and I hope also rationally, you have to tell me if that kind of came well together or if it was still disjointed, because it was, to me, it's very clear that that is a story, that is the story about letting go, making space for something else, for the people that are not here but that are here, and for a decision to lead the family and say, okay, we're doing it. We haven't done it 30 years ago. We got to do the funeral now. And at that point, you need to end as quickly as possible, okay? Because you're on a high. And your ego will tell, okay, so you made them cry, you have them sitting here, it's a factory event, you're only like 40 minutes in, why don't I ramble? I got them captive. Why don't I go long? Instead, that is the moment, you have the high, set them free. How do you set people free? You give them what I call a summary, but in the storytelling terms, in the movies, for instance, in the Lord of the Rings, there's the hawks take the Fellowship of the Ring and they bring it back to the Shire, right? And they see all of the landscape, all of the mines, all of the mountains from above. And the idea is that in the ending, you're zooming out, you're making the picture wider and wider and wider, so that you tell your audience, hey, look, we just met, but this is the ground that we covered. And so it's not a summary, it's a kind of an exciting moment where you bring all the threads together. And if you want, at that point, you can give them something to do or not. But basically, well, what I did I like the idea of symmetry here. So there is the Zen version of the story. Is it a blessing or a curse? Or be careful how you see the world. It is like that. It's actually the same thing. They're completely interchangeable. I could end the presentation with the Zen story about the horse, or I can end it like I did. I kind of like the more kind of intellectual thing that grounds us at the beginning and the more story thing that let us imagine things. But who's to choose? So basically, this beginning and this ending are a mirror. And in between them, there's just a high point. If you play the high point of the story right, and you end quickly, you have it. And at one point of this presentation, I had only this. Okay, I had this. I reviewed all the stories, like, this is the most powerful story. So I had this, and then I built the rest. Once you know how you're ending, the rest kind of figures itself out. It's also a question of doing it a million times. You get a little bit better. And if you can, well, what I did here with this is that I took a complicated framework that is very perfect to observe a story. So I can, and it's actually quite fun to train the language model to say, evaluate the story based on the 17 steps of the hero's journey. And I did it for this talk, actually. Every time I did a rehearsal, I also fed it to the LLM, and I had it spit back, how do you think this went, etc. I can show you the graphs. This guide, Claude can also map the engagement level of the talk. I'm actually going to show it to you in a second. But it's not very useful if I tell you, now tell the story of your life in 17 heroic steps. Where do you even start? Instead, if I tell you, you basically elevate the stakes at the beginning. Give me some problems to chew on, okay? Because nobody wants to hear about a story where everything goes well. Be clear about what's your big idea and end really quickly. You have a blueprint. You have something you can do.
The frameworks are a big bill in your stories.
Yeah.
What do we do with this framework?
This framework sticks. This framework, I'm really racking my brain around this, but this framework sticks. I'm trying to destroy it. I'm trying to let it disappear. But I think that this framework emerges from mythology. And mythology is the language, when people go schizophrenic, they go mythological, actually. So they start thinking that there's, and they really, like the dreams that they have, the visions that they have, are actually connected to traditional mythology. Every story fits with this, and stories are who we are, basically. It's like all our beliefs, etc., stem from stories. And so it's really hard to get rid of this if we are creating stories for human beings. If we're creating stories for computers, then we can trash this and we can do something different.
Sorry. May I highlight 2 problems that I'm facing with this story right now? Is it okay? Absolutely, yes. I love that. So, in the first thing, to me, as a story, it has a problem that you felt relatable only in the story. Every hero has a friend or an inspiration or even someone who gives validation. For example, you decided to came out. So, I'm imagining, because I'm also having like decisions in my life and in my 20s, and I had problems, and there are always people who are trying to encourage me to do something and not to do the other. Sometimes I take their advice, and sometimes their advice is my motive push. Sometimes their advice is pushing me to do the exact opposite. But in the story, you felt a little bit long. So this is like the first problem. The second problem with the story is organized in a really good way, but the thing that I found hard to connect, for example, if we got people and we tell them this story, but we don't tell them, and we tell them the values, but we don't tell them the values connected to which part of the story. They let go, they make space, and they take decisions. I think there might be people that gonna link it in a different way. For example, they're gonna take a decision, put it with the taking over the school, because you take a decision to do it now. And they let go, and they came out because you lost the friends and you lost the relatives and people who you know. So this is also the thing that I'm having like a problem with in the story. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I also want to invite everybody to tell me what didn't work, and this is you are definitely right that in the process of storytelling is a process of cutting down things. Yeah. And so one thing that I needed to cut down, for instance, were my friends, and another thing that I tried to cut down as much as possible is my family. Okay, and so what the result of that is the feeling that you had is absolutely valid and correct. And also the decision to assign these to different points of the story and then have them come together in the ending of the story is totally arbitrary. You're totally right. You can use it in a different way, and it gives me time to think about it and think, are these examples better for this or that of the manifestations of letting go, making space, and decide? That's all very valid feedback. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm thinking how much thought you put into relating story to the audience, because like you did the one with the bad bosses, like who here has that boss? I'm like, oh, he's gonna talk about like one particular force that made him hate his job or something. But they're like, oh, that really sucks. And then you didn't really go into that part, but like what the boss kind of gave you. And maybe it's kicking me, but maybe there was like another instance where you relate the story to your audience, and like how much of that should be there? Like how much of that did you do intentionally?
Yeah, I wish I had 2 or 3 moments where I wanted to have the interaction, but the talk is not developed enough for me to have that. So every time you don't interact with the audience, you're keeping control for yourself, and you're trying to make sure that you can navigate your own material. Every time you interact with the audience, you're even more confident with the material, and you let the audience go in whatever direction they want. And so it's definitely, you pointed to an insecurity that I was having, and that led me to take control. And you're right, like in this process of cutting stuff, I didn't want to have 2 or 3 minutes on the bad bosses. I have a terrible mobbing story to tell, but I thought to make it more of a common trope, if that's a thing, like make you think about your bad bosses rather than telling you about mine. And I might even completely change the framing of all of that. Maybe I can just tell the story of at 14 I got shares of a startup. Imagine if that was Facebook. That might be punchy enough. Again, this process of cutting until you get to the essential. I'm sure that we can deliver this in 10 minutes. I don't know how. I need to deliver it in 40 minutes, and then in 30 minutes, and then in 25, and then in 20, and it's an iteration process. And if you give me a year to figure it out, I will tell you all of this in 60 seconds. Oh, yeah, over there.
I really like how you use pauses throughout your story. Is there a technique how you stay so calm, composed, and then decide when to pause or how long to pause to still capture the attention of the audience?
I have a problem with filler words. I use a lot of fillers still. I tend not to use them, but I'm going to review the video also for this to improve. And the pause, it helps so much to avoid filler words. And it creates this expectation. What's coming next? And so it helps with the fillers. It creates expectation. It's just something that you need to get comfortable with, because you know you have everybody's eyes on you. You have to be fine with that. And just live through the pause, knowing that what feels for you like, oh, I paused for 60 seconds, for everybody in the audience is, I can finally breathe. He stopped talking. And it feels like 3 seconds to you what 60 seconds feels to me.
So is 3 seconds an ideal duration for a pause in most cases? Just curious, because for people who are not used to pausing, we don't know how long is too long.
You can see it in the eyes of your audience. Just look them in the eyes and they will tell you.
Is everything okay?
Yeah, it's a check-in. Yeah. Well, if you do it on Zoom, they'll think you froze. So it's not a good technique for Zoom. But Zoom is not a good communication system anyway. We're missing so much information.
Is this framework applicable to delivering very technical information?
Yeah.
Example? Like, how do you make something dry and very scientific into the story?
Well, usually something technical is a solution to a problem. And the developers, the engineers, etc., are super excited that they finally solved the problem of gravity. There's an anti-gravitational train. But in order to make it interesting for me that it's an anti-gravitational train, maybe if you can explain that if you have a train that actually sits on the tracks, it consumes the tracks, it consumes brake pads, it creates noise, it pollutes the environment, etc., and by having levitating, we solved all of these problems. Then I'm interested in knowing about the positronic tachyon beams that allow the superposition of the quantums to make the train levitate. Oh, yeah.
I have two questions. First one would be like, you don't always have such an attentive audience. I guess most of the time you have, but sometimes how do you deal with that? Like when you don't have attention of the audience.
You gotta involve them, yeah. You gotta involve them. And usually you need to start with jokes. You need to start with crass things. You need to have, ground level of articulation. You have to speak things in a very street way. It's like you're basically saying, hey, I'm here. This is gonna be fun. And so on. So you really need to start gathering attention, and it's all about also how attractive you are. And it's not about the physical appearance, but it's about the body language. So if everybody is distracted and I go, you're just gonna go away, okay? Because I'm like in myself, I'm slouching and so on. But if I say, hey, how about we begin? Like, how much time do you need to finish that phone call? And so on. And I start, and I start joking with my audience, which is something that's really hard to do, but you can do it in an instant while you're there. Or you might, if you know that you are at a conference or a dentist conference, you might prepare like 3 or 4 dentist jokes. You can ask GPT for that.
Do you actually have other techniques than joking? Because, I mean, if we remember what you told us about, there are some moments when you actually don't want to joke, I guess. And if you feel a shifting in attention in that moment, how could you do? Apart from jokes.
How would I have done it today if I felt that the attention was...
It's unlikely because the story was
captivating.
Yeah. So usually when you lose the attention during is because your stories are too long or your beats are too long. And what you would do is you would jump to the conclusion immediately and set a reset, basically go back here, re-elevate the stakes. So what I'm going to tell you next, it's something that nobody actually knows and nobody's ever heard. Okay, now I got your attention again. Another framework, for lack of better terms, that I use and I try to use, I've been starting to experiment with this, is the idea that we communicate with two different parts of the brain. If you're familiar with Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow, we have a fast part of the brain, which is the first one that developed. Let's call it the monkey brain. And that part of the brain is all about I like, I dislike, it's gut feelings, is I feel comfortable, I don't feel comfortable, I like you, I don't like you, good smell, bad smell. And these are things, it's an instant, we need a lot of information. And then we have, let's say, this part of the brain here, that is slower, it's more rational. It says, you're proposing an investment, let me see the numbers. Does it add up, or are there some hidden costs here? It's a slow part of the brain. When you are speaking, you need to first engage the quick part of the brain before you engage the slow part of the brain. And so when you notice that people are distracted, it means that you stopped appealing to the older part of the brain and you were too much talking about how the tachyon beam is actually adjusting the gravitational pull on the monorail.
I have a question about, so when you started speaking at the beginning, like your voice, the way you pronounce words, it's really already capturing the attention. Like the story about the poor sound is like an audiobook, which I a little bit rolled my eyes about, like not the 40 minutes. And then you change the pace, so like, okay, great, you got it. And I think a lot of people here are not native English speakers. And for me, it's also always like how much attention you have because my accent is foreign to you. And at the beginning, I didn't really Google you, I just a storytelling workshop or right? And that's what you're an American or British because it's very audiobook accent. And then you let the Italian accent came out. I was like, definitely there was work to adjust both. And also the work on your voice, then I'm pretty sure there's some exercises before the talk to like, I don't know, strengthen your voice, make or even any advices on like that. Like the work with your voice and the work with your pronunciation maybe.
Oh, first of all, thank you. I'm glad that there's a story voice, a story that is not mine, and then there's a voice for the stories that are mine. And obviously, when I talk about Italy, I know subconsciously I'm going to pronounce things well in proper Italian, and then it kind of influences the English accent. I record myself. I listen to myself. Now, it's uncomfortable. However, after you listen to, I think it's 100 or 150 hours of yourself, it's not uncomfortable anymore. Okay? So you just go through that. And you listen to yourself, and you figure out what are the things that you're not pronouncing correctly. You expose yourself as much as possible with the language. This is something that I do all the time with English. And for instance, I made sure that in the past 4 hours, I didn't speak German, because that would seep into the English as well. And you listen to yourself, and you try to correct yourself. There is a fantastic tool called Descript that allows you to upload audio or video and then highlights all the filler words. And it's really good. Even the ones that are almost like undetectable, it would kind of find it and highlight it in the script. It's something pretty powerful. So I would do all of the self-review, as much self-review as possible. Then there's genetics. When I looked that way, you remember, I had this voice. So one morning when I was between 13 and 14, I woke up in the morning and I don't know, I said good morning to my mom, and then I turned around saying, who's dubbing me? Who's synchronizing me now? What's happening? And that was my voice. And then I smoked cigarettes for 10 years and kind of lowered even more. But more or less, I learned how to play with it, but it was already there. So also, it's good advice to play on your strengths. But it can be improved, and I don't really use it correctly. I could use more diaphragm. One of my goals is actually to learn singing professionally, and I'll get there. But thanks. Oh. There you go. Oh, yeah, I should. We have a common friend. Yeah. Yeah, we have a common friend who has all the techniques that you'll ever need. Okay, Claude has this pretty amazing dashboard feature. And I don't know if I can make this bigger. No, it's not helping. But more or less here, there's some little lines. And these are the different versions of the talk that I uploaded over time. And I asked for an engagement analysis. And well, obviously the language models tend to comply with orders, and somehow my engagement is through the roof all the time. But it actually highlights, if we hover over here, it would highlight that the school story needs to be shortened, which I did. And so it was quite interesting to have some feedback just from the language model as it is. And this is not the only dashboard that I have, and because this is the engagement flow, but... Whoa. Sorry?
What are the different colors?
So the older ones are below, and then they get better and better, and the last one is on top. And
how does that relate to that? Because it seemed like the first story was more of a wave, whereas the later ones were high engagement.
The idea here is not to analyze the storytelling, but just to analyze the peaks and troughs of getting and losing attention from the audience. And so thinking if you're going long, if the story is too long. And so, for instance, here there's a speech structure analysis that is kind of done in this very specific way. There's also, I think at the beginning I had, if I close this, does it show me all of the different dashboards that it created? So this is the speech refinement guide. This is the engagement flow from previous versions and so on. And then the other fun thing that I always do is I have created a project inside Claude, but these are like other tools. I don't want to create an ad for Claude. There's different tools, and here I've created a library of my own content, and then I've put 4 famous copywriters as act as. So I have David Ogilvy, I have Rory Sutherland, and so on and so forth that kind of criticize me, and either one by one or as a group. And that was also helpful because the process is you do it like this. You start recording yourself. Then you listen to the recording yourself, so you give yourself notes. And then the transcript, you can upload it to the language model with different prompts, and then you get some information from there as well. So, and then you do another rehearsal. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of time, even just to get to V1, which this was definitely the V1 of the talk.
I imagine it took a while to get to the prompts. Would you be willing to share?
Oh, sure. And I mean, just send me an email. The prompt for this one is really simple, and I can share it with you. So my storytelling dashboard prompt is generate a visual dashboard, highlight if and how the different parts of the talk align on the 7 steps of the hero's journey, include suggestions on how to improve the storytelling of the talk. So it's really basic. And my mastermind kind of know everything is here on the right. You can see that these are all documents of stuff that I've written, newsletters, scripts, all sorts of marketing material. But the prompt is extremely simple. Is act as David Ogilvy, Gary Halbert, Rory Sutherland, and Eugene Schwartz. And a couple of those are famous direct mail copywriters who've created these offers that you would get in the post and made wondrous amounts of money with those. And the other two, one, Rory Sutherland is the actual current boss of Ogilvy and Mather, the agency, and David Ogilvy is the founder of Ogilvy. So, okay, before we end, is there anything that you didn't like at all? Just be completely free. Let's start like a 2-3 minute clock where you're completely free to say, Matteo, you really got to change that. That really didn't work. Give me the hard-earned feedback.
I think in the context of the Martha story, you jumped too fast into it, and it took me a while to kind of connect with it.
Good, thank you.
I was super engaged most of the time, but I think if it's limited with 3 stories, it's gonna strike me more. Like 5 was a bit. At some point, I was questioning. Okay, he grabbed my attention really well. I'm still hanging here, but 5 was too much. At the very beginning, you set the tone, and then I was like, okay, 5 is too much. Yeah, let's see. But 3 would be probably perfect.
Wonderful. Yeah. I always advise my clients to do 3 for 40 minutes. Never follow your own advice. Yeah, please.
I kind of liked Pat because at the beginning it says like, oh, it's going to be my life story. Like, cool, 5 stories. Like, a lot to learn about you. For the Marcus story, it felt for me that then first 4 were rehearsed, structured, 10, all the elements are there. And for Marta, it felt like you went a bit freestyle. Like they weren't script, which was fine, but yeah, I was a little bit lost there, so they got a big time.
More structured. Yeah, got it. Thank you.
What I would be interested in what your age was during the Marta story. That was like
was missing
in my head and it distracted me probably a little. But wondering, did he say that or did he not? And a positive, what I really liked or what I thought is the main message at the end was to allow yourself the vulnerabilities. That was for me a very strong message and stronger than that. Let's go and leave other things. So I really thought this is the main message and was really strong.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I should have told the age, absolutely. All right, if there's nothing else, I think we deserve another drink. Oh, yeah, sorry, it's you.
I would say the transition or connection. So because it is 5 story, I was engaged, but I was trying to condense like when you move to a new story. Yeah. I was trying to condense it to the other one. Where was the dates lost like in between? Maybe more connection and transition, so we know like why you're going into this or this connects to this. But
no, thank you. I in some rehearsals I had a better connection between the stories, and yeah. Oh, here.
That one woman brought up by the age, because when you said, oh, there was a sister and then like, oh my god, there's a lost sisterhood much older, and like they're the secret affair story. 10-15 seconds I tried to debunk it. I was like, oh, that's completely different story, and I called that. Oh, wait. But I still doing it.
Yeah, it's too ambiguous. I agree.
As you go through the stories, the classic storytelling style is you change, right? You become a new person, right? When you encounter a difficulty, the school prop changes you somewhat. You go through life, boom. But then that new changed version encounters the difficulty, you change in this direction. So that kind of clear content, that's a classic storytelling technique, right? That will help me connect dots and then can lead to the big revelation. Now I reach this level now, and it's allowed me to grieve my sister who never had a funeral she deserved.
Spot on.
Maybe one of the things that the years was mixed up because I believe that the biggest story, the last one, was when you were 14, but before it you were like doing stuffed up thing and you were trying to find as in the cache the fake cache and the Philippine backed up. So this is switch would for me disconnect the self-development because this story is before this one. So for example, for any story, a hero will go through stuff and we get new weapon during the journey, but you got a weapon and then you get back to the beginning and you reveal the new something. So this was a bit disconnected also. Not much, but yeah.
Very good point. Thank you. I just want to invite you. That's my newsletter. If you want to keep in touch with me, that's the best social media that I know. And thank you so much for coming. Feel free to stick around for another half hour, grab a drink, have a chat with each other, with me. Thank you so much for coming. This meant a lot to me. This is a really important day for me, and to have you here, it's been all the difference. Thank you so much.